I was 78 the morning I understood, clear as a church bell on a cold Sunday, that the young man living under my roof wasn't helping me out of kindness. He was waiting, patient as a fisherman, for the moment I slipped just far enough that he could strip me clean. You'd think after all these years I'd see it coming. I fought in Nam, poured concrete for 32 years with the laborers' union in Columbus, Ohio, raised 2 boys on a mechanic's salary. I've survived heart trouble, bone spurs, and a winter that damn near took my fingers. But I wasn't prepared for betrayal from someone I'd welcomed into my home. The realization hit me on a Thursday morning in March of 2022. I remember because the local news was talking about a late cold snap coming in from Indiana, and the sky had that heavy gray look it gets when the weather's about to turn. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the same scarred oak thing my wife, Margaret, bought back in '89. My coffee had gone lukewarm. My hands shook a little, arthritis acting up, and I reached for my pill organizer. When I opened it, something didn't look right. Saturday's pills were gone, but it was only Thursday. I called out, "Evan, you in here?" He came in from the hallway, hoodie half-zipped, hair a mess like he just rolled out of bed. "Yeah, Pops, what's up?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "You take out my meds?" I asked. "Saturday's missing." He blinked a little too slowly. "You must have forgotten you took them. You've been tired lately. Maybe you doubled up." The way he said it, gentle, patient, like I was already halfway to memory care, sent a cold line of dread down my spine. I knew damn well I hadn't doubled up. I wasn't perfect, but my mind was still my own. I held his eyes, watched the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. That's when something shifted in me, like a window cracked open in a stale room. You're probably thinking, why didn't you kick him out right then? Truth is, I needed him, or at least I believed I did. After Margaret passed in 2017, the house felt too big, too quiet. Then I'd had that minor stroke in May of 21. The doctors at Riverside Methodist said it was small but important. My gait changed, my left hand stiffened, and my youngest son, David, suggested I shouldn't be living alone. Evan, his son, offered to move in to help Grandpa out. He said he'd take me to appointments, get groceries, keep an eye on things. At first he did. He really did. He'd push my cart at Kroger, mow the lawn without being asked, sit with me during Bengal's games. I'd started to believe maybe this would be good for both of us. He got cheap rent, I got company. But now something was wrong, and the missing pills were just the first crack. That same morning, after Evan disappeared back into the hallway, I noticed my checkbook sitting at an odd angle on the counter. I hadn't touched it in 2 days. My stomach tightened as I opened it. I flipped through the carbon copies. Nothing jumped out. But I could smell trouble on the air. A gut feeling, the same one that saved my hide more than once in the jungle 50 years ago. Later that afternoon, Evan offered to drive me to my physical therapy session. He was all smiles, trying too hard. In the passenger seat of my old 2010 Silverado, I watched him drum his fingers on the steering wheel, humming to himself like nothing was wrong. "You all right, Pops?" he asked. "You've been acting kind of jumpy today." "I'm fine," I said, "just thinking." He glanced at me, quick and sharp. "About what?" "About trust," I said, keeping my eyes forward. He let out a short laugh. "You worry too much." But I wasn't worried, I was watching. The real shattering moment didn't come until we got home. The sky had darkened into a deep, bruised purple. Evan carried in my grocery bags and headed down the hallway. I stopped in the doorway of my bedroom, feeling something was off. My desk drawer, the one where I keep my bank statements, Social Security letters, and the paperwork for my IRA, wasn't fully closed. I hadn't opened that drawer in a week. When I slid it open, a draft of cold air seemed to hit my chest. My February bank statement wasn't there. Neither was the folder with my 401k rollover documents. Pages that should never leave that drawer were missing as cleanly as if someone had plucked them out with tweezers. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees wobbled. I lowered myself onto the edge of my bed, heart thumping so hard I could hear it in my ears. Something deeper than anger took hold of me. It wasn't fear either. It was betrayal, thick, metallic, familiar in a way I hated. When Evan popped his head in the room and said, "You want me to heat up dinner?" I swear I saw it, just a flicker, the satisfaction behind his eyes, like he already owned everything in this house, including me. That's when the truth settled in. He didn't move in to help me. He moved in to empty me out. But I'll tell you something he never saw coming. I wasn't done. Not by a damn sight. I might have been slower, weaker, older, but I wasn't helpless. And I wasn't about to be anyone's easy mark. That night, lying awake while Evan's footsteps crossed back and forth down the hallway, I made myself a promise. I whispered it into the dark, quiet enough that only I could hear it. "You picked the wrong old man." And that was the moment, right there, when the path toward revenge began, one deliberate step at a time. Before everything cracked open, life had settled into a kind of steady rhythm, the kind old men learn to accept, even appreciate, once the noise of the working world has faded out. I want you to understand what my days looked like before Evan's shadow fell across them, because without that picture, you can't grasp the weight of the betrayal that followed. Most mornings I woke up around 6:15. Not because I had somewhere to be. Old habits just don't die easy. 32 years of pouring concrete means your bones know sunrise even if your eyes don't. I'd shuffle to the kitchen, joints popping like distant firecrackers, turn on the percolator, and listen to it hiss and rumble while the house woke up around me. Furnace kicking on, pipes settling, a faint hum from the old refrigerator Margaret, and I bought at Sears back in '96. I used to sit at that scarred oak table, same one where my boys did their homework, with a cup of black coffee and the Columbus Dispatch folded just so. Never needed anything fancy. I'd skim the headlines, shake my head at whatever the politicians were doing, check the Reds' scores even though they hadn't given us much to cheer about in a while. It was a quiet life, but it wasn't empty. Most days before my stroke, I'd drive my Silverado down to Denny's on High Street. They knew me by name. "Morning, Mr. Harlan," they'd call, and I'd wave like I was part of the furniture. I always got the same thing, 2 eggs over medium, rye toast and sausage links that were too salty and too greasy but worth every guilty bite. After Margaret died, those breakfasts kept me upright. Talking to the waitress, listening to the clatter of plates, feeling like the world still had corners where I wasn't alone. I'd go to the VA clinic once every couple months for my blood pressure meds, check in on a buddy from my old unit who lived over in Grove City, and sit on the back porch in the evenings with a cold ginger ale, watching the sun lower itself behind the neighbor's maple. It was a small life, sure, but it was mine. When I had my stroke in May 2021, everything shifted. It wasn't a big one. They called it a minor ischemic event, but it left its mark. My balance went off and my left hand had a tremor like a loose wire. I couldn't drive for a while, couldn't mow the lawn, had trouble carrying groceries. The house that once fit me like an old work glove suddenly felt like a maze with too many corners and not enough railing. That's when my son stepped in, or tried to. My oldest, Mark, lives out in Phoenix, working some sales job he's always stressed about. He called a lot at first. "Dad, you sure you can handle the stairs?" "Dad, maybe sell the house." But calls don't cut grass or get you to therapy. David, my youngest, lives over in Dublin, 20 minutes away, but raising 3 kids and running a HVAC business meant he was stretched thin. He meant well, though. He'd drop off casseroles from his wife or come by to fix something small. It was during one of those visits that he said, "Dad, maybe Evan could move in for a while. He's between jobs and he's always been close with you. He could help you around the house." I remember nodding slowly, rubbing the stiff knuckles of my left hand. "Would he even want to?" I asked. "He offered," David said. "Said he felt bad he hasn't been around much." That part hooked me. I'd always had a soft spot for Evan. When he was a kid, He used to sit on my lap while I watched Red's games, asking a million questions. At Christmas, he'd help me string the lights, even after the other grandkids drifted off. I thought maybe the world hadn't hardened him the way it had most young men his age. So when he moved in that September, 23 years old, clothes stuffed into garbage bags, a beat-up iPhone held together with tape, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like purpose, a second chance at something I thought I'd lost. The first couple months, he really did help. He drove me to therapy, cooked simple meals, carried laundry baskets down the basement stairs. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch with cans of root beer, not talking much, just sharing the air the way men do when words aren't needed. "You ever miss work?" he asked me once. "Every damn day," I said. "Not the work itself, the men, the noise, the feeling that what you did mattered." He nodded like he understood, though I'm not sure he could. Looking back, there were small signs, barely whispers then but loud as alarms now. A missing 20 from my wallet. My keys moved from where I left them. Him asking questions that felt a little too specific. "How much do you get from Social Security again, Pops? You still got that old 401k lying around?" I heard some banks flag withdrawals for old folks. That true? I chalked it up to curiosity. Young people don't know how retirement works, or so I told myself. I wanted to believe the best of him. Wanted to believe I still had family who cared enough to stand beside me when I needed help. That hope is a dangerous thing at my age. It blinds more than it comforts. The shift in him started slow. He began sleeping until noon, leaving dishes in the sink, letting the lawn grow wild, borrowing my truck without asking, spending more time in his room with the door shut and the glow of that damn computer flashing under the crack. And then came the day, about 2 months before I found the missing bank statements, when he stood in the kitchen, leaned against the counter like he owned it and said, "You know, Pops, with your health the way it is, maybe we should get some of your accounts streamlined, just in case something happens." I remember pausing mid-sip of coffee, the bitterness hitting the back of my throat. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just paperwork, maybe adding me as a signer on a couple things, would make life easier for both of us." Easier for him, I realized much later. But back then, I just felt tired. Too tired to argue, too confused to understand the shape of the shadow forming behind me. "And besides," he added casually, "you know I got your back." I looked at him then, really looked, and I swear to God for a split second something flickered behind his eyes. Not warmth, not loyalty. Opportunity. I didn't know it yet, but the boy who used to help me hang Christmas lights wasn't the same one standing in my kitchen. Somewhere along the line, he'd learned how to smile while taking things that didn't belong to him. And I was still foolish enough to let him try. The worst betrayals never come from strangers. They come from the ones you set a place for at your own table. You'd think the first crack would have been obvious. A missing check, a suspicious withdrawal, a lie slipping out of his mouth sideways. But no, betrayal doesn't walk up and shake your hand. It sneaks in quiet, wearing the face of someone you love. For me, it started with a phone call. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late November, cold enough that the windows in the living room had fogged over. I'd settled into my recliner after physical therapy, my legs trembling more than usual. Evan was in his room, door closed, tapping away on that computer like he was training for some secret typing Olympics. I remember thinking I should probably ask what he was working on, but something in me hesitated. Maybe I didn't want the answer. The phone rang, my old landline, the one Margaret had insisted we keep, just in case of emergencies. I picked it up, pressing the cool plastic to my ear. "Mr. Harlan," a woman asked, polite, professional. "Yes, ma'am." "This is Denise from Huntington Bank. I'm calling to confirm a recent request regarding your online access." That sentence hit me like a pressure drop before a storm. "I'm sorry," I said, sitting up straighter. "What request?" There was a rustle of paper on her end. "It appears someone attempted to reset your online banking credentials earlier this morning. We wanted to confirm it was you." My mouth went dry. "No," I said. "No, that wasn't me." She paused long enough for me to hear her breathing. "All right, then I'll mark it as unauthorized. Would you like us to freeze the account temporarily?" My eyes drifted toward Evan's closed door, a thin bar of LED light slipping from underneath. My heart thumped once, deep and slow. "Not yet," I said. "Just cancel the request." "Of course, and please, if you notice anything unusual." "I'll call," I said and hung up. I stared at the wall for a long minute, felt the blood draining from my face. My left hand tremored so bad I had to steady it with the right. That was the first real crack. But here's the thing, I still didn't want to believe it was him. A man my age has plenty of enemies, though most of them are just time and gravity. But a grandson, the boy I taught to skip stones in Buckeye Lake. No, I couldn't swallow it yet. So I pushed myself up, knees popping, and headed toward his door. "Evan," I called. The clicking stopped, a beat of silence. Then, "Yeah, what's up?" "Open up a second." He cracked the door, leaning his shoulder against the frame. The room smelled like body spray and the sour tang of energy drinks. Behind him, the blue glow of the computer cast his face in strange shadows. "You all right?" he asked. "I got a call from the bank," I said. "They said someone tried to reset my online info." He blinked once, twice, too slow. "The bank called you, seriously?" "That's what I said." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe it was some scammer. They do that all the time. You shouldn't answer unknown numbers, Pops." "It wasn't unknown." "Oh," he shrugged. "Weird." I watched his eyes. People tell you to watch the mouth for lies, but they're wrong. It's in the eyes where truth slips out. And right then, something flinched behind his. "Did you do anything on my computer?" I asked, calm, steady. "Why would I?" He shot back too fast. That was the second crack, defensiveness sharpened by guilt. "I wasn't accusing you," I said quietly. His posture softened just a hair. "Look, Pops, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you set up something online a while ago and forgot." And there it was, the third crack, the one that cut the deepest, the seed of doubt he tried to plant in my mind. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded and said, "Maybe so." He smiled, small, relieved, and closed the door. The moment it latched, I felt something settle in my chest. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. That night I noticed another thing. A small thing, but in betrayals, small things matter. The medication tray again. At first it was just a pattern I couldn't quite pin down. A pill missing here. A dose rearranged. Nothing large enough to confront him with, but enough to keep me awake. One evening, while Evan was at the gym, or at least that's where he said he was, I opened the kitchen drawer where I kept the extra bottles. One was lighter than it should have been. The label said 90 tablets filled on October 3rd. I counted 52. I knew damn well I hadn't taken 38 pills in less than 2 months. When Evan got home, sweat dampening the collar of his t-shirt, I asked, "You been taking any of my meds? Painkillers, maybe?" He chuckled, actually chuckled. "Pops, if I wanted drugs, I wouldn't be digging through your prescriptions." The way he said digging made my stomach clench. "You know," he added casually, "a lot of older folks mix things up. Doctors say it's normal." I kept my voice level. "I'm not confused." He nodded like he was humoring a child and headed to his room. That was when the first crack widened into something bigger. A few days later, something else happened. Something that forced me to face what I'd been trying not to see. I came into the living room and saw him sitting at my desk, going through a stack of envelopes. My private mail, My Social Security statement was in his hand. "What are you doing?" I asked. He jumped, dropping the papers. "Jesus, Pops, you scared me." I asked what you're doing. He bent down to gather the envelopes. "You had mail piling up. I was just organizing. You get so many bills." "I didn't ask you to." He stood up slowly, something hardening in his expression. Not anger, not yet. Annoyance. Entitlement. "Look, I'm trying to help," he said. "You don't make it easy." The tone, that tone, like I was an obligation, a problem, a burden he was tolerating until he could cash the payout. I walked toward him, slow but steady, put my mail down. He hesitated, just long enough to show me who he was becoming. Then he set it down, raised his hands like I'd overreacted, and said, "Fine, whatever, handle it yourself." He brushed past me, shoulder hitting mine a little too hard. And that's when I knew. The boy who moved into my home wasn't taking care of me. He was positioning himself, studying my weaknesses, testing boundaries, gathering information like a thief planning a job. And I, old, tired, still trusting, had given him the keys. But don't think for a second that I broke. No, something else woke up in me that day, something I hadn't felt in years. A slow, smoldering resolve. The first cracks weren't the end, they were the opening. He thought I was slipping. He thought I was alone. He thought he had time. He was wrong. You'd think the truth comes in like a thunderclap, loud, undeniable, lighting up the whole sky. But mine arrived quietly, on a gray morning in early December, the kind where the cold seeps through the windows and settles into your bones. I remember the exact moment my life split in half, before and after Evan's betrayal stopped being suspicion and became fact. The day started ordinary enough. I'd slept poorly, tossing around with that ache in my hip that feels like someone's twisting a screwdriver in the joint. When I finally got up, the house was silent. Evan wasn't in the kitchen, which was unusual. He liked to be there when I woke up, pretending to be helpful, hovering just enough to watch me. I shuffled to the counter, reached for my coffee mug, and noticed something that stopped me cold. The drawer with my financial paperwork, always kept closed, always, was half open. Not wide, not enough to be obvious. Just enough that someone had opened it and forgotten to close it the whole way. My stomach tightened. I pulled it open the rest of the way. The folders were out of order. A corner of a statement was sticking up where it shouldn't be. My hands trembled, not from age this time, but from knowing, deep in my gut, that this was the moment everything changed. I sat down at the table and started flipping through the documents. Social Security letters, tax forms, old medical bills, all untouched. But my checking account statements, the February one was missing, and now I saw the March one was gone too. That hit me like a body blow. I didn't need proof anymore. I needed details. I checked my wallet next. I always keep my debit card in the same slot. Always. I opened it. The card was there, but it felt wrong, different. The surface was slightly warm, like it had been handled recently. For a fact, I hadn't used it in 4 days. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for the landline and dialed Huntington Bank. The buttons felt small under my shaky fingers. After 2 minutes of hold music, a representative answered, a man this time. "Hi, this is Thomas at Huntington. What can I help you with today?" "This is Harold Harlan," I said, voice tight. "I need to know if there's been any activity on my checking account in the last few days." "Absolutely, Mr. Harlan. Let me pull that up." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. My pulse pounded in my ears. "I'm seeing several transactions within the last 72 hours, he said. My throat went dry. "What kind?" "Let's see. One withdrawal at an ATM near Sawmill Road for $400. My heart sank. Then another. One debit purchase for $179.99 at Best Buy. My vision tunneled. And one online purchase for. He paused. For $1,238.64. Everything inside me went still, not quiet still, like the air before a tornado. Sir, he asked, are you there? I forced myself to breathe. Yes, keep going. That's all within the last 3 days. Would you like to dispute any of these? I closed my eyes, saw Evan's face, heard his soft chuckle as he told me older folks forget things, felt him brushing past me in the hall, slipping into my room when I took my afternoon naps. Yes, I said, all of them. He cleared his throat, all 3. Yes, I said again, freeze the account. Right away, sir. When I hung up, I stared at the wall. The room felt cold, hollow in a way I can't explain. My chest tightened, not like a heart attack, but something else, something deeper, something breaking. You know what the worst part was? Not the money. I could survive the loss. I'd lived through worse, recessions, layoffs, medical bills that nearly wiped us out in '93. Money can be replaced. But trust, once that's broken, you can't glue it back together. I heard the front door open, heavy footsteps. Evan walked in carrying a plastic shopping bag. Hey, Pops, he said brightly, you eat yet? I looked at him, really looked. The way he avoided my eyes, the way he set the bag down fast like he wanted his hands empty, the nervous shuffle he did when he walked around the table. Where were you? I asked quietly. He shrugged, out, got us some groceries. I pointed at the bag, let me see. He froze just for a second, barely a flinch, but I caught it. He pulled items out one by one. Bread, apples, a rotisserie chicken, a 6-pack of root beer. Normal. Too normal. I asked, you use my card? His face changed, quick, subtle, but enough to see the lie forming. No, used mine. My voice stayed low, calm. Let me see your card. What, why? Because my account was used, and you're the only one here. He backed up a little, eyes narrowing. You think I stole from you? I didn't answer. Silence is sometimes the sharpest blade. He scoffed, shaking his head. You're losing it, Pops, seriously. You've been confused lately. Maybe you forgot you bought something. I didn't. He laughed, but there wasn't a drop of humor in it. Man, this is crazy. I'm helping you, and this is what I get. I leaned forward, my voice steady as stone. The bank froze my account. They're opening an investigation. His jaw tightened. There it was, fear, brief, flickering, but real. He tried to cover it with anger. You don't know what you're talking about. I said nothing. He paced fast. You're gonna make this a thing, over a misunderstanding. Still nothing. He slammed his fist on the table. You're acting nuts. I watched him calm, quiet, letting the silence fill the room until he couldn't take it. He grabbed his coat, muttering, I'm going out, and left, the door slamming so hard the windows rattled. When the house finally stilled again, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That was the shattering moment. Not the money, not the lies, but the realization that the person living under my roof wasn't a caretaker. He was a predator, and I was his prey. Only he hadn't realized, yet, that I wasn't nearly as weak as he thought. What broke in me that afternoon wasn't my heart, it was my tolerance. And once an old man like me stops tolerating, well, that's the beginning of a whole different story. When people talk about the darkest part of their lives, they usually mean a moment, one night, one decision, but descent is slower. It's a long hallway where each light flickers out, one by one, until you're walking blind and hoping your hands find a wall before you hit the floor. Mine began the day after Evan slammed the door and left me sitting at that kitchen table with the bank freeze notice still echoing in my ears. I didn't understand the real danger yet, not until I woke the next morning and found Evan standing over my bed. The sun hadn't even come up. A faint blue-gray glow seeped through the curtains. I blinked my eyes open and saw him in silhouette, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, breathing slow, steady. Too steady. "Jesus, Evan," I muttered, pushing myself upright. "What are you doing?" He didn't move back, didn't even flinch. "You were talking in your sleep," he said softly. "I what?" My throat was dry. "You said my name." I stared at him, trying to read the shadows on his face, but he stayed still as a tombstone. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine," I lied. He nodded once, then turned and walked out. No explanation, no apology, just walked out and left the door open behind him. That was the moment I started living in fear. I hate admitting that. I really do. Men like me, we don't say we're scared. We don't show our necks. But fear has a way of cutting through pride, especially when your body isn't what it used to be. And that morning I realized something painfully simple. If he could steal from me, he could hurt me. If he already saw me as weak, what stopped him from seeing me as disposable? The house felt smaller after that. The hallway narrower. Every sound, a footstep, a door creak, the refrigerator clicking on, tightened something inside my chest. I stopped going to Denny's, stopped sitting on the porch, stopped answering the phone unless I recognized the voice. The world got smaller and Evan got larger inside it. I remember one afternoon, cold and gray like the world had run out of color. I walked into the kitchen and found him sitting at my table with my checkbook open in front of him. "No," he said before I could even speak, flipping it shut. "You left it out. I was putting it away." "I didn't leave it out," I said. He shrugged. "Maybe you forgot." There it was again. That line, that weapon, "maybe you forgot." He wielded it like a knife. I didn't argue. What good would it have done? A fox doesn't explain himself to the hen he's circling. But inside, a crack widened. A few days later, the isolation set in. Isolation is a predator in its own right. It eats reason. It eats confidence. It eats memory. One night, lying awake in the dark with the wind howling against the siding, I started second-guessing everything. Maybe I did misplace that bank statement. Maybe I had taken my pills early. Maybe the bank clerk misunderstood something. Maybe Evan wasn't lying. Maybe I was failing. That's the cruelest part of elder abuse, the way it makes you doubt yourself, the way it turns your own mind into unfamiliar territory. I'd sit in the living room and hear Evan laughing in his room, low, private laughter, and it made my skin crawl. Not because laughter is sinister, but because I knew I wasn't part of whatever joke he thought he was telling. One night I heard him talking on the phone. His room was right above mine, and the floor vent carried sound like a funnel. A man's voice said, "Did you get the info?" Evan answered, Yeah, he's old. He doesn't know what he's doing." My blood ran cold. "Soon," Evan said, "just need a little more." I sat there in the dark, staring at the wall, feeling every old bone in my body go rigid. More what? Money, paperwork, access. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep much after that. Then came the worst day. It was December 19th, the kind of freezing morning where even the furnace seems tired. Evan came into the living room, stretched like he'd slept without a worry in the world, and said, "Hey, Pops, I talked to a woman at the county office. She said we should get you set up with a medical power of attorney, just in case something happens." My heart stopped dead in my chest. "What woman?" I asked. He waved a hand. "Some clerk told her I was helping you manage things." The room spun. "You told her what?" He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Look, it's normal. Old people do this. It helps your family help you, and it protects you." "No," I said. "Yes," he countered, stepping closer. "We'll go down next week. You just have to sign a few things, nothing complicated." I felt the walls closing in, trapping the air out. "I'm not signing anything," I said. His eyes hardened, cold, flat, unfamiliar. "You should," he said, "before something happens." "Something happens." "Not if." "When?" A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This wasn't a kid making mistakes. This was intent. Evan wasn't just stealing. Evan was planning. Money wasn't enough. He wanted control, legally, entirely. That night I sat at my kitchen table long after he'd gone to bed, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, a tired old man in a flannel shirt, eyes sunken from worry. I felt small, smaller than I had since the worst days of Vietnam. Out there, at least you knew who the enemy was. At least you could see the tree line, the muzzle flash, the direction the danger came from. This danger lived across the hall. But here's the part I haven't told you yet. Descent isn't just falling. It's falling until you hit something solid enough to push off from. And that night, somewhere between fear and exhaustion, I felt something shift inside me. A spark of the man I used to be. The foreman who kept 20 men safe on job sites. The soldier who crawled through mud under enemy fire. The husband who held Margaret's hand while she died. That man wasn't gone. He was waking up. And he wasn't going to let Evan finish what he'd started. You know, folks like to believe revenge starts with anger. That's not true. Revenge, real, deliberate, patient revenge, starts with clarity. A single cold breath where everything sharpens and you finally see what you must do. For me, that moment came on December 21st, 2 days after Evan pushed the idea of power of attorney on me. I woke at 4:17 a.m. No joke, I remember the exact time, because my house was too quiet. Not peaceful, not still. Quiet in the way a place gets when danger is awake before you are. I eased myself out of bed, careful on my bad hip, and stepped into the hallway. Evan's bedroom light was on. I could see the thin glow under his door. At 4 in the damn morning. I stood there holding my breath, listening. No movement, no talking, no typing, just the faint hum of his computer fan. Something in my gut twisted. I went back to my room, shut the door softly, and finally admitted something that had been eating at me. I couldn't handle this alone anymore. The descent had worn me down, my body slower, my mind fogged from lack of sleep and constant fear, but it hadn't broken me. No, sir. I still had enough sense left to know when I needed an ally. The first person I thought of was Rosa. She wasn't family, wasn't even a friend in the traditional sense. She was my physical therapist at the OSU outpatient clinic, a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes, a steady voice, and a way of looking at you that made lying feel pointless. She'd been working with me since my stroke, helping me get my gait back, showing me exercises that made my muscles burn in the right ways. And she noticed things, little things. More than once she'd asked, "How are things at home, Mr. Harlan? You seem tense." I always brushed it off. But December 21st, I didn't brush anything off. When I got to the clinic later that morning, the place smelled of disinfectant and winter coats, that mix of cold air and Lysol you only get in medical buildings. Christmas decorations hung everywhere, cheap paper snowflakes, a fake tree in the corner with lights that blinked unevenly. Rosa guided me to the treadmill, helped adjust the safety strap, and said, "You look tired." I stared straight ahead. "I need to ask you something." She paused. "All right." I swallowed hard. If someone you trusted, someone living with you, was doing things behind your back, financial things, what would you do? Her eyes softened, but her voice didn't change. "Who, Mr. Harlan?" "My grandson." She didn't rush me, didn't interrupt. She just placed a hand on the rail beside mine and said, "Start from the beginning." So I did, quietly, carefully, like peeling back a bandage that stuck too tight. I told her about the missing pills, the bank statements, the ATM withdrawal, the way he stood over me while I slept, The phone call through the vent, the push for power of attorney. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, I didn't need to. By the time I finished, her jaw had tightened, and her hands were gripping the treadmill's rails so hard her knuckles turned pale. "Mr. Harlan," she said, "this is beyond concerning. This is dangerous." I nodded. "I know. You can't stay there alone with him." "I don't have anywhere else to go." She inhaled slowly. "Yes, you do." Then she leaned in, lowering her voice like we were discussing state secrets. "I have a friend, Margaret Chen. She works with Franklin County Legal Aid. She deals with elder exploitation cases. Quietly. Thoroughly." "Legal aid?" I asked. "I can't afford a lawyer." "She doesn't want money. She wants to keep people safe." Something warm flickered in my chest. Hope, maybe, or relief. Hard to tell the difference when you've been carrying fear for months. Rosa squeezed my forearm. "Let me call her." That afternoon, while Evan was running errands with my truck, God knows where, Rosa arranged a meeting for me. Not at an office, not in a courtroom, at a diner off Dublin Granville Road, neutral ground. Her instructions were simple: don't tell Evan, don't bring anything he might notice missing, don't walk too fast, don't look nervous. I felt like a soldier again, following quiet orders. The next morning I took the 33 COTA bus to the diner. I hadn't ridden a bus in 20 years. The seats felt harder. The ride felt longer. The people felt younger. But when I stepped into that diner, something inside me steadied. Margaret Chen was waiting in a corner booth. Petite, sharp-eyed, with a stack of folders beside her and a coffee she hadn't touched. She stood when I approached. "Mr. Harlan," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "please sit." I did. "Rosa told me what's happening," she said. "And before we go any further, I need you to know something. You are not alone, and this is not your fault." I felt my throat tighten. No one had said that to me in a long time. She slid a notepad toward me. "Tell me everything, slowly. Details matter." So again I did, but this time I didn't hold anything back. When I finished, she sat back, hands folded. "This is a pattern," she said. "Documented, predictable, and actionable, and it's escalating. Your grandson is testing boundaries. He has already taken money. The next step is obtaining legal control. After that, the outcomes vary, but they're never good." A cold ripple ran through me. "What do we do?" I asked. "We build a case," she said. "Quietly, methodically, carefully, you gather evidence. I guide you. Rosa stays alert for signs of physical risk." "Evidence?" I echoed. She nodded. "Bank statements, photos, recordings, logs of unusual behavior, screenshots if you can manage it, anything that shows a pattern of exploitation." I felt overwhelmed. I'm not good with technology. "That's all right," she said. "We adapt." Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "And Mr. Harlan, if he tries to isolate you further or push you to sign something, you call me. Immediately, day or night." I nodded. "And one more thing," she added. "Do not let him know you're onto him. Not yet. He must believe you're still vulnerable." That part was the hardest, pretending. But sometimes survival requires weakness as camouflage. When I left the diner, the sky was bright and cold, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't walking alone anymore. Rosa, Margaret, two women who didn't owe me a thing but stood up for me anyway. That was the beginning of the gathering, the moment I stopped being prey and started forming a pack of my own. When I got home, Evan was in the living room, feet propped on my coffee table, scrolling through his phone. He looked up lazily. "Where'd you go?" he asked. I smiled, small, tired, believable. "Just getting some fresh air." He didn't suspect a thing. But if he had looked closely, really closely, he might have seen it. The old man he'd been circling had stopped shrinking and started sharpening. The thing about a good plan is that it takes time to build. You don't rush it, you don't show your hand too early. You bide your time, waiting for the perfect moment when everything aligns, the pieces fall into place, and you've got control again. That's what I told myself as I sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee at the same table where Evan and I used to talk about everything under the sun. Now, the words we shared felt hollow, tainted by the knowledge of what he was doing behind my back. Rosa had been clear, don't act in haste, don't let him know you're on to him. She even gave me a small recorder, just the size of a pack of cigarettes, so I could capture evidence without raising suspicion. It's legal, she assured me, as long as it's within your home. I wasn't thrilled about the idea. Recording your own flesh and blood felt wrong, even though I knew deep down that this wasn't my fault. It wasn't my betrayal. It was his. Over the next week, I played my part. I made sure everything seemed normal. I kept quiet. I smiled and nodded when Evan made his little comments about getting things in order around the house, about helping me out with the paperwork. Every time he suggested a new arrangement, I just let it slide. There were moments when I wanted to scream. There were nights when I couldn't sleep because the weight of knowing what he was doing gnawed at me, but I stuck to the plan. I kept my cards close to my chest, kept my movements slow and calculated. And as the days passed, I gathered my pieces. I kept a log, simple notes, nothing too detailed but enough to capture the pattern. The dates he mentioned the power of attorney again, the times he'd been in my room when I wasn't there, the small comments that didn't fit right. Each moment was a stitch in the fabric I was weaving, slowly but surely. I took the recorder with me to the grocery store, slipped it into my pocket when I went to the post office. If he suspected anything, he never said it outright. But I could see the change in him. The more I seemed to resist, the more subtle his approaches became. Then came the day I knew I'd been waiting for. It was December 28th. The sky outside was overcast, the air heavy with that kind of winter chill that makes the inside of the house feel too warm, too suffocating. Evan came home from whatever errand he'd been running, and I could tell something was off. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a tightness in his shoulders, a quickness in his steps. He didn't greet me with his usual, "Hey, Pops," just a curt nod as he dropped his bag by the door. "What's going on?" I asked casually, not looking up from my crossword puzzle. He didn't answer at first, just rummaged through the kitchen, putting things away with a little more force than necessary. Then, without warning, he turned and said, "I've been thinking, Pops, about the medical stuff." I kept my expression neutral. "What stuff?" "About me being the one to help you with everything. All the bills, all the decisions." His eyes met mine, calculating, weighing something behind his gaze. "It just makes sense, right? You know I'm your only family." I kept my voice steady. "I've got everything under control." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "It's not about control. It's about you being able to trust me, to let me help you in a way that makes things easier. You don't want to end up in a hospital somewhere and not have anyone who knows what's going on with your accounts." I could feel my pulse quicken. He was pushing. He'd tried to play this game before, but now there was an edge to it. It wasn't just talk anymore. He was trying to corner me, trying to make me feel like this was my only choice. I leaned back in my chair, giving him a long look. I saw the cracks in his cool facade, the twitch of his lips, the flicker in his eyes. "You don't get to make that decision for me," I said quietly. For a moment he didn't respond. He just stared at me like he was sizing me up. Then, without warning, he grabbed my checkbook from the counter and flipped it open. "I know what's in here, Pops. I know what you've got. We don't want this to get ugly, do we?" The words hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. He wanted everything. He wanted me to give it to him, piece by piece, until I was nothing more than a shell he could manipulate at will. That's when it hit me. I was no longer just trying to protect my finances. I was trying to protect my dignity, my autonomy, my very sense of self. and he was making it clear he'd take it all if I didn't stop him. I let the silence stretch between us, a quiet, thick moment where everything seemed to hang in the balance. "You think you can just take what's mine?" I said slowly, my voice low but clear. "You think you can just walk in here and make decisions for me like I'm already gone?" Evan didn't back down. "I'm just trying to help, you'll see. I'm doing what's best for you." "Don't tell me what's best for me," I snapped, finally rising from my chair. "You don't get to make that choice. I'm not your damn property." For the first time I saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes, the fear of being caught. For all his bluster, for all his manipulation, there was a crack in his armor now, a deep one. I took a slow breath and stood up straighter. "I've been quiet long enough, but I'm done pretending." He hesitated, and in that brief, precious moment, I saw what I needed to see. The power balance was shifting. The truth was there, and it was starting to come to the surface. I turned and walked toward the hallway where the phone was. "I'm calling Rosa," I said over my shoulder, "and I'm calling the police. You don't get to take from me anymore. This stops now." I heard him scramble behind me, heard the scuff of his boots on the floor as he rushed to block my path. But I didn't stop. I walked past him, feeling the strength in my legs, the certainty in my chest. He could try to push, he could try to intimidate, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the old man who had to sit back and let him do whatever he wanted. Not anymore. As I dialed the number, I could hear Evan's voice rising behind me, desperate, trying to reason with me, trying to twist the truth the way he always had. But this time, I wasn't listening. I was setting the trap, and it was finally time to spring it. I could feel the weight of the phone in my hand as I dialed Rosa's number, the numbers clicking beneath my fingertips like the sound of a clock winding down to its final seconds. The air felt thick, like the walls themselves were waiting, holding their breath, knowing this was the moment. Evan was behind me, his voice rising in frustration, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see his face to know what it looked like. I had reached the point of no return. There would be no turning back now. The phone rang once, twice. Then Rosa's voice came through, steady, calm as always. "Mr. Harlan." "I need help," I said, keeping my voice low. I didn't want Evan to hear the tremor in my voice, didn't want him to know how close I'd come to losing everything. "He's not going to stop. I need you to come over." There was a pause, just a beat, before Rosa spoke again, her voice calm and direct. "I'll be there in an hour. Stay safe. Don't do anything rash." I hung up and turned slowly to face Evan. He had stopped talking, but his posture was different now. His chest puffed out, jaw clenched, eyes wild with something that bordered on panic. I could see it, the realization sinking in, the understanding that I wasn't backing down. "You're really going to call the cops on me?" His voice was tight, controlled, but there was a tremble to it. "You think they'll believe you over me, old man? You've got nothing. Nothing but a handful of accusations and your word." I held my ground. I didn't need to respond to his accusations. I didn't need to explain myself. I had already made my decision. Rosa was on her way, and with her, the legal evidence we had been collecting for weeks. The pieces were coming together. Everything was about to change. "You've already taken enough from me, Evan," I said, my voice a steady murmur. "You've taken my trust, my peace, and now you're trying to take control. I'm done." The tension in the room thickened. For a moment, the silence was louder than anything he could say. I could hear his breath coming faster, his mind scrambling for a way out. But it was too late for him to stop it now. Then the doorbell rang. Both of us froze. I didn't need to look at Evan to know he knew who it was. Rosa and Margaret Chen had arrived. I could hear the distinct sound of heels on the porch, the soft knock on the door. "Stay here," I said quietly, turning toward the door. Evan's hand shot out, grabbing my sleeve. His voice, desperate now, cracked as he hissed, "Don't do this. You'll regret it. You think I'm the only one who's taking from you. You'll never see it, but I'm the one who's been keeping things together for you." I pulled my arm away, the anger rising in my chest, but I kept my voice low, steady. You think you're the only one who's been working hard for this. You think you're the only one who's suffered. You're wrong. You're just a thief hiding behind a smile, and I'm done pretending I don't see it. I opened the door. Rosa was there, her face calm but alert. Margaret Chen stood beside her, carrying a folder, her eyes sharp as ever. They stepped inside without hesitation, walking past Evan as if they had no fear of him. It was a moment of power reversal, one I had been waiting for. Evan's bravado crumbled the second they crossed the threshold. "Mr. Harlan," Rosa said, her voice low but firm, "we're here to make sure you're safe." Evan's face twisted with rage, his fists clenching at his sides. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Margaret held up a hand. "We have a few things to discuss, Evan," she said, her tone flat and professional. "You've been under investigation for several weeks now, and it seems we've gathered enough evidence to make sure this ends today." The weight of her words settled over him like a cold blanket. His face went pale, the bravado draining from him in an instant. He looked from me to the two women standing by the door, their presence now the undeniable force that would undo him. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, you're lying, you can't." "We can," Margaret interrupted, her voice unyielding. "You've been taking money from Mr. Harlan's accounts. You've been manipulating him and taking advantage of his trust. You've been trying to get him to sign legal documents he didn't understand. This ends today." Evan's eyes darted between Margaret, Rosa, and me. He knew the game was over. He knew the trap had been set and sprung. There was no getting out of it. "I didn't mean," he started, his voice trembling. "You didn't mean," I echoed, taking a step closer. "You didn't mean, you thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I wouldn't catch you. You were counting on me getting too old to fight back." "Don't do this, Pops," he begged, desperation creeping into his voice. "I'm your family. I'm the one who's been here for you." I stared at him, and for the first time in weeks I felt a sense of release, a weight lifting from my chest. I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't the helpless old man who could be manipulated. I was standing tall, facing the person who thought he could take everything from me. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You're not my family, not anymore." Rosa turned to Margaret. "We've got everything we need. The police are on their way." Margaret nodded, pulling out a folder with documents, proof of everything Evan had done. Bank statements, transaction logs, recorded conversations. Every lie, every theft was laid bare before him. Evan's face was ashen now, the mask of arrogance gone. He backed away slowly, his hands raised in surrender, but it was too late. He'd already been caught in the web he thought he could control. His escape routes had all been sealed shut. "You have the right to remain silent," Rosa said softly, stepping toward him as the first police officers arrived at the door. For a long, painful moment, Evan didn't say a word. His face was twisted with a mixture of fear and shame, his body stiff with the realization that he had lost everything. His plan had failed. His betrayal had been exposed. And there I stood, the man he thought he could break, watching as his world crumbled around him. It wasn't a feeling of triumph, not really. It was just the cold, final relief of knowing that justice had a way of working itself out. As the officers escorted Evan out, I turned to Margaret and Rosa. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You saved me." Margaret gave me a small, understanding smile. "No, Mr. Harlan, you saved yourself." And with that, I realized something. I might have been the one to sit back and let it all happen, but it was me who stood up when it mattered. It was me who ended it. No more. And for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The aftermath wasn't what I expected. I thought it would feel like a grand victory, like a weight lifting from my shoulders, like a clear-cut ending where everything fell neatly into place. But it didn't. The truth is, when the world around you unravels, it's not like you get to flip a switch and just move on. It took a while for the dust to settle. After the police took Evan away, hands cuffed, head down, his world crashing all around him, I stood there in the doorway watching them go. His face was pale, lips pressed tight, and I didn't know if he was more angry or scared. The look he gave me as he passed was strange. It wasn't just the fear of being caught. It was something deeper, something broken. Maybe he realized then, for the first time, that I wasn't the fool he'd been counting on. But that didn't matter. I wasn't looking back, not anymore. Once the house was empty again, the silence felt different, thicker. The walls seemed to close in, and for a while I sat in the kitchen, nursing my coffee, replaying everything in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about the trust I'd given him, the way I had let him inside my home, let him inside my life. Why didn't I see it sooner? I wondered. Rosa checked in the next day. She was calm, collected like she always was, but there was something in her voice that sounded relieved. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm all right," I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my own voice. I thought this would feel different. "It's natural," she said. "There's no rule book for how you're supposed to feel. You did what you needed to do and it's over. But that doesn't mean it doesn't leave a mark." It did, a big one. I wasn't sure if I was more angry or sad, but every time I closed my eyes I saw Evan's face, the boy I had trusted, the one I had let get too close. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to rage against the betrayal. But in the quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts, I didn't feel the rush of justice I thought would come. All I felt was an emptiness I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about the money. Hell, the money was already gone. The withdrawals, the purchases, the manipulation. But what Evan had stolen from me wasn't just dollars and cents. It was trust. And trust is a hell of a thing to get back once it's gone. Margaret Chen called later that afternoon and we talked through the legal process. It would take time, she said, several months at least, before the case went to court. Evan would likely face charges for financial exploitation, theft, and fraud, but there was still a long road ahead. The police had gathered enough evidence, but the wheels of justice turned slow. Still, it wasn't the fear of what was to come that weighed on me. It was the slow realization that I was still recovering from the worst part of all, the betrayal. The hardest part came a few weeks later when I got the first letter. It was from a lawyer's office in the city, representing Evan. He's fighting back, I thought, my stomach churning as I tore open the envelope. But when I read the letter, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a defense of what he'd done or a demand to drop the charges. It wasn't an apology. No, it was a request for restitution. His lawyer was claiming that, in some twisted logic I still couldn't follow, I owed him money. They claimed he had been forced to act as my caretaker and that I had neglected him emotionally, making him feel as though he had to take matters into his own hands. I couldn't help it. I laughed. I laughed like a man on the edge because there was nothing else I could do. It was absurd. A poor attempt to shift the blame to make me out to be the villain in this sorry mess. But it wasn't just the letter that bothered me. It was the realization that Evan hadn't changed. He still saw himself as the victim, the one who had been wronged. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash, but something stuck in my mind. He hadn't learned a damn thing. Evan wasn't just playing the game of manipulation anymore. He was rewriting the story in his own head. And I realized that maybe that was what hurt most of all. Not that he had tried to take everything from me, but that he couldn't even see the wrong in what he had done. He believed on some level that he was entitled to it. And that was the part I couldn't forgive. The following months passed in a blur of paperwork, court dates, and meetings with Margaret and the police. I was too busy, too wrapped up in the details of everything to focus much on the small things that once mattered. I stopped going to Denny's for a while. I stopped taking walks down the street. But there were moments when I found myself sitting at the table, the quiet in the house a stark reminder of how much had changed. I wasn't sure what the future held, or if I would ever feel fully at peace again, but I knew one thing. I had taken control back. I had stood my ground. And that had to be enough. But that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always unravel in a straight line. Sometimes, the consequences are quieter than you expect. And though Evan's downfall was inevitable, it didn't erase the damage done. It was only when the trial date was finally set, months later, and I was sitting in the courtroom, waiting for the first hearing to begin, that I realized just how far I had come. And when I saw Evan standing there in the defendant's box, looking so much smaller than I ever imagined, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel relief either. I just felt tired. Tired of the fight, tired of the lies, tired of the hurt. But there was something else in me, too, a quiet peace. A peace that came from knowing that for all he had taken from me, I still had control of the most important thing, my story, and it wasn't finished yet. The trial didn't take long. It never does when the truth is on your side. Evan's lawyer tried to spin a web of lies, tried to paint him as the dutiful grandson who only wanted to help. But the evidence we had gathered, every bank statement, every recorded conversation, every piece of documentation, told a different story. The witnesses, including Rosa and Margaret, stood firm in their testimonies. They told the court about the subtle manipulations, the missing funds, the power plays Evan made. They described his attempts to isolate me, to force me into signing documents I didn't understand, his calculated attempts to control my finances. In the end, the jury didn't need much convincing. The facts were irrefutable. Evan was found guilty of elder financial exploitation, theft, and fraud. The sentencing would come later, but it didn't matter anymore. The moment I walked out of that courtroom, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and relief, like I had been carrying a weight I didn't know how heavy it was until it was gone. The fight had taken so much from me, emotionally, physically, but it had also given me something back that I didn't realize I had lost. I hadn't just won back my money. I had won back my dignity, my independence, my voice. The hardest part wasn't standing up to Evan. That was easy, once I finally had the courage. The hardest part was knowing that I had allowed him to take advantage of me for so long. The hardest part was learning how to trust again, not just in others but in myself. As the weeks passed, I started to reclaim pieces of my life. I went back to Denny's for breakfast, the quiet hum of the diner familiar and comforting. I started walking down the street again, just to feel the sun on my face, to remember what it felt like to be free. The house felt different now, empty, yes, but no longer suffocating. I found myself thinking about Margaret and Rosa, the two women who had stood by me when I couldn't stand for myself. I owed them so much more than I could ever repay. Evan's sentencing came in early March. He was given 5 years of probation, and he would have to repay the stolen funds. But none of that mattered to me anymore. His punishment wasn't going to undo the damage he had done. I didn't need him to be punished to feel vindicated. I just needed to know that I wasn't weak, that I could protect myself. The best part of the resolution wasn't the legal victory or the restitution. It was the quiet understanding that I had survived. And that was worth more than anything he could have ever taken from me. There were no grand moments after the trial, no dramatic endings, just the slow, steady return of peace. Some nights I would sit on the porch, a cold drink in hand, watching the sky change colors as the sun set. The house was quiet again, but this time it was a peace I had earned. I wasn't alone. I wasn't weak. I wasn't a victim anymore. I didn't have to go through this alone. I had people who cared, and I had the courage to fight back. That was enough. And as for Evan, I hadn't heard from him since the trial. The letters stopped coming, the phone calls. He had his own battles to face now, but I didn't concern myself with him anymore. What mattered now was that I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe easy.